All right, since this is recorded and I know people are really, really busy and are going to catch up on the recording later, we'll just go ahead and get started. We are delighted to be here with all of you today to share some of our latest progress on the All In initiative and the All In community. For those of you that has been following us along on our journey, we started All In 2021, so about 2 years ago. Can you all believe it?
Wow.
And we set out with this grand mission or this grand aspiration to open source diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so the first thing we did was we kicked off with the 2021 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Survey. And then the next thing that we did was we went on a maintainers listening tour, where we listened to hundreds of maintainers in focus groups, and we did a survey for them. We also had individual interviews where maintainers shared with us what some of their challenges were, what was working, what's not working, what they would like to see in a program that would support them. And I know some may be wondering, why are we focused on maintainers? And the reality is that a maintainer is very similar to a manager of a team in any organization, whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking about a company, whether you're talking about a university. If you have a small team, you're going to have that manager or that coach. And that's kind of the role that the maintainer plays for a community. And what we heard from countless people is that diversity, equity, and inclusion, it really happens at that community level. Those day-to-day interactions amongst contributors, and it's that maintainer or that manager, if you will, that community leader that actually sets the tone for an inclusive environment. And so we were very intentional about wanting to build a program for them. But as Sarah, someone who's part of our team here at GitHub and the All In team often says, we want to build with maintainers, not for maintainers. So that's why we kicked off the listening tour. Now, when we kicked off the listening tour, we had several themes that we heard from maintainers. The first was that they didn't need any more resources. There was tons of articles, podcasts, conferences, events, you name it. They had it. They just wanted it in a centralized location. And so that's why we launched back in February the All In DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Resource Hub, which is that one-stop shop for maintainers or anybody, if you will, where they can find those resources in one centralized location so it's easier to access. So we invite you to go to allinopensource.com/maintainers to check out the DEI Resource Hub, as well as to share any of those amazing resources that you may come across that you would like for the entire community to have access to as well. Another thing that we heard, which is why we're all here today, is that maintainers really wanted to be able to see those other communities who are doing diversity, equity, and inclusion well, who's actually, making some strides in it, who's actually has some best practices, and they needed a way to actually easily recognize them. They also wanted a way for them to actually kind of have this journey, so to speak, so that they can start at one level and know that there's a different level that they can go to improve, and then on up to the next level. And so that's why we came up with this DEI badging initiative, which what we're going to talk about today is going to serve as the foundation for that. But I want to take a step back. When we started thinking about All In, especially when it gets into badging, we knew that we couldn't do this without the folks, the amazing folks who already have been doing like so much amazing work in badging with their Project Badging Initiative. And that's the awesome Chaos team who we have here today on this panel. And I can't say that we call them just for the badging, like they've been helping us with the survey, the listening tour, like all of the things All In. So I'm delighted that I call them my partners, as well as most importantly, my friends. So without further ado, I'd love for you all to introduce yourselves, in which I'll come back and introduce myself because I forgot all about that. I jumped right in. But first, we'd love to hear from you, Elizabeth, then Ruth, then Matt, and then Sean.
Hey everyone, I'm Elizabeth. I am the Chaos Community Manager, and I've been at Chaos for about 3 years. I do a lot of work, obviously, in the community, but also on the DEI working group and our event badging initiative that Demetris mentioned earlier, and a lot of other things at Chaos. So it's great to see everybody.
Okay, I think I'll go after Elizabeth because I work closely with Elizabeth, so why not? All right. So hi everyone. My name is Ruth Kagar, and I do a couple of things at the Chaos Project. And I also joined 3 years ago. And Elizabeth, I didn't know you joined 3 years ago as well. Um, okay, so I lead the African chapter of the Chaos Project, and I'm also an active participant of the DEI working group here at Chaos, and I'm excited to be part of this effort. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about all we have planned for DEI badging. So yeah, I'll hand it to Matt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt German-Prey. I'm a professor by day and also Chaos co-founder and active participant in the Chaos Project by day as well. So we kind of do many things. I've been involved in the Chaos Project since the beginning. It's been just a pleasure working with absolutely everybody in the Chaos Project and everybody here in this get-together. I'm just really excited to work with the All-In team and kind of put this badging work into practice and really help people best center DEI. I'd also like to just say thanks to the Ford Foundation and the Sloan Foundation, who have been long-term supporters of the work that we do in the Chaos Project and in our partnership with All-In.
And I'm Sean Goggins. I'm also a professor by day of computer science at the University of Missouri. I've been involved with All-In since 2021 and Chaos since the very beginning. I'm an active maintainer of the Chaos Project as well as a number of open source software projects myself, so have a kind of maintainer's perspective on these things. I think the DEI.MD badge and the way that we've approached and designed the way that it's going to work, working very closely with Chaos Africa and Ruth Aikiga, which is what we're going to be talking about today, is going to reflect something I think really interesting to maintainers. And I'm excited to talk about it and just to share this opportunity with you. And of course, thank our funders as Matt did.
Awesome. That is amazing. And since all of you shared what you do by day, I will also share that I am the Senior Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at GitHub. And if I didn't say my name, I am Demetris Cheatham, and I guess the founder of the All-In community. And this is what GitHub has given me the privilege of working on every single day. And so we also have not only All-In for maintainers, but we have All-In for students as well. I won't go over that, but it's an amazing program. And I invite you all to just go to our website, allinopensource.org, and just check out some of the initiatives that we have. But each of you mentioned the DEI-MD, DEI badging initiative. But before we could even get into badging, we had to have the information for us to actually analyze and to badge. And that's where this DEI.MD file comes into play. So before we even get to the what it is, let's talk about why this is important. So Elizabeth and then Ruth, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Sure. So I see the DEI.MD file as kind of a next level of the code of conduct.md file. So if you go back in time a little, before codes of conduct were a thing in open source, there really wasn't a way for a maintainer to really explicitly show what the expectations for behavior in the community were. And if they had anything documented at all, it was something like be nice or don't be a jerk. It was not very explicit. And so, as we know, for folks especially marginalized folks, that's really not enough. And so, eventually the code of conduct became a way for maintainers to really set those expectations and signal to everybody what those expectations are and what happens, kind of if you break the rules. And so the other thing that was great about that was that it gave potential contributors a central place to look. Like one place. I know now if I want to join a community, I can go to that code of conduct.md file to see how they have that set up. So we're kind of hoping that this DEI.md file works in much the same way, because right now information about, a project's practices and policies around diversity, equity, and inclusion are spread out all over, maybe difficult to find, maybe haven't even been written down in one place. So, and certainly, not easy to find for potential folks that aren't familiar with the project. So that's why we were hoping that having this in one central place is going to make it easier for potential contributors and others to find out what those practices and policies are.
Awesome. Ruth, if you would share with us, because we know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is different depending on where you are around the world. And I know you said you're the leader of the Chaos Africa chapter. I'd love to hear about the benefits of this DEI.md file from the international perspective.
Yeah, sure. And I think we might have a real life example right here because my internet is spotty. I just even texted Elizabeth. So let me know if you can hear me correctly, right? Or if like I'm breaking or cutting off. So from an international perspective here, and even going back to when I joined the Chaos Project, before participating in open source, and here in Africa, we are at the awareness phase, and people are getting to understand, okay, this is what open source is, and this is how I can participate, and where are the projects that I can find. And we have our cultural, like we have those cultural differences, we have level of skill set differences and all that stuff. And when I try to find a project, I want to also figure out how that project attends to my needs, attends to my differences as well. And that is really important for me, because if I do not know that as a potential contributor, I might feel I'm not welcome in there, or I do not belong to that project. So our hope for the DEI, like why it's important, is it helps just the contributors from like an international perspective see how they belong in your community just before they join your community, right? They see how they fit in, they see how they can participate, they see that their voice is being heard, or their contributions are being taken account for. So it's just kind of that's what we hope to see with DEI.md file. And even also like education, the education piece, because I know, like Demetris mentioned earlier, everybody, like the diversity, equity, and inclusion is different for everybody, right? And I think it even goes down to later in this panel where we'll talk more about that, right? The DEI.md file also helps the contributors understand the different aspects of DEI that they are not even aware about, right? And even speaking to leading the Chaos Africa community, it's been really interesting to see the kind of diverse contributions that we've had in the Chaos Project, and how much impact like those contributions have had on the Chaos Project. So that's my view from like an international perspective.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing you all say, you hear this all the time, where people will say, hey, you can contribute to open source from anywhere in the world, no matter who you are, where you come from, and your backgrounds. And what we're attempting to do now with this DEI.md file is you're saying everyone is welcome. Now tell us how. What are you specifically doing? And so that's where I like this, because as we know, inclusion and belonging, they can be these nebulous terms that can mean so many different things. And it's going to look different. Basically what Ruth said, it's going to look different from person to person and from project to project, community to community. And we're just starting now to centralize these efforts so people can really, really see it. And so, when I first was speaking earlier, I was talking about how this fits into the work that we're doing with All In, and how we're, working on this, and how it fits into the bigger picture of GitHub. But we said at GitHub, we wanted to open source diversity and inclusion. And that means bring in the people who are doing this, doing it well. And it kind of is what they are naturally good at and experts at. And so that's why when we started talking about badging, there was no one else but Chaos to come to, right? Because you all are doing it so well. And so Matt, I mentioned it earlier, but I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper into how this work really is an extension of what Chaos has already been doing for years now.
Yeah, you bet. So DEI badging it's been an important part of the work we do in the Chaos Project really for over 2 years now. In the Chaos Project, we develop and publish a variety of metrics, many of which are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And several years ago, we started a program for DEI event badging, where organizers can apply for a Chaos DEI event badge based on their attention to such issues as, say, family friendliness, event family friendliness, event code of conduct, or event demographics. And to date, Elizabeth, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've badged over 100 events through an open and transparent process. So the process is, event organizers apply, and then through a GitHub issue, we have open discussions between the event organizers and the individual Chaos badgers. All of the applications are reviewed by people from the Chaos community and are publicly available, like I said, through GitHub issues on our DEI event badging page. So kind of stemming from this work, DEI project badging was the next consideration with respect to working with All In and putting Chaos DEI metrics, an additional set of Chaos DEI metrics into practice. So like event badging, project badging seeks to have, these Chaos DEI metrics, which by themselves are just markdown documents. So our goal is to have these documents have a positive impact in helping project members consider how to best center DEI in the communities that they participate in. And the DEI.md file is based on 4 Chaos community developed metrics. And I think we'll see those a little bit later. Elizabeth, I think you're going to share that DEI.md file.
I can share it now if that's helpful.
You could, yeah. So, it's based on those metrics with the hope of helping communities consider and express the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion for all project members. And so here is a sample of the DEI.md file. Whoops, and it just went away. There was.
You can put a link in it.
Sure. And so all I just wanted to show here is the 4 metrics that we have in the DEI.md file are project access, and you can just kind of scroll through those, Elizabeth. Communication transparency, newcomer experiences, and inclusive leadership. So this is really kind of a natural extension, Demetris, of the work that we were doing with DEI event badging as well.
Yeah, so, when you talk about family friendliness and, accessibility and all those things, it made perfect sense to me. I could clearly see what it looked like from an event standpoint. But Sean, we haven't heard from you yet, and Elizabeth, feel free to jump in as well. How does this work from an open source community perspective, like when you start looking at those 4 metrics that Matt just mentioned?
Well, the most important thing is when you compare event badging to project badging, you have hundreds of events a year, you have millions, tens of millions of contributors and projects. So we had to come up with a way to scale, a way to actually show people that this would be valuable. And so the badge itself, which you get through creating initially through the DEI badge, it demands this not overwhelming, but thoughtful consideration. It's not like getting a build status badge for your project, but it's really about, applying for the badge and then having some level of automation, which Chaos Africa, my team at Chaos Augur, and Elizabeth and GitHub are working with us on, so that more than 100 projects can get the DEI badge every year. And so this also solves a bunch of problems that maintainers face. So there's I think, motivations for maintainers. We know from talking to maintainers and contributors that most of them are overloaded with work. And so this badge provides an important purpose of working to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive open source community. And I think in a lot of ways, as we approach all of our projects and consider practices that make them accessible and welcoming to more diverse contributors, we're also doing things that help encourage all contributors and solve this labor shortage that I think exists in much of open source. So knowing that's where CHAOSS and what we're doing in CHAOSS, and that this is working, there's a lot of scientific research that, we know that these aims come together. I mean, we know that attention to newcomers, responsiveness to issues, using language that's more accepting and less harsh, these are things that, if you are doing these things, you're fulfilling some of the metrics in the DEI.MD file. And the way that we're going to automate this is really create a common reference where first we're going to scan for the presence of a coherent DEI.MD file. And then we're going to compare each of the projects against a set of reference projects in the corporate, scientific, and government communities so that we get a relative idea of how the projects compare with reference points. And then instead of giving somebody a statistical report with a bunch of graphs, here's where you sit, we're going to actually provide concrete advice on things that they can do to make their project more inclusive and welcoming.
Yeah, totally get that. And what you were just saying, May, it brought up an interest. I'm sorry, Sean, it brought up an interesting point for me, right? DEI is so subjective, right? Like I can give a prime example. I remember when I was speaking at it was a class at a university, and everybody had their cameras off. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, I didn't feel welcome at all. Like nobody was paying attention to me. And when I talked to the professor who invited me later on, just to share, some of how I felt about it, he was like, oh, we actually train our students to always keep their camera off, except for if they're speaking. So that was their norm. And so you see how just depending on where, because at GitHub, we typically keep our cameras on. So you see how it can mean different things to different people. And that's just one example, but I'm looking at some of the, criteria and some of the examples that you all have for each of these different 4 areas for these metrics. They can look different from project to project. So with so much being up for interpretation, how is this going to work? Like, how is this going to make sense? So Ruth, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. So giving like this example here, because so we're not trying to it's not a judgment process, or it's not to say if your project doesn't fulfill all these things, maybe you're not among the cool kids or something else. But for us, it's a self-reflection process, right? For you to take a step back, or for your project to take a step back to see how you attend to all these different 4 metrics right here, right? To do like an internal process and think about. And I think I would say for us is also making the world, or maybe the open source ecosystem, a better place, because like I said earlier, different people, they have there are different differences around the world, and different people participate and contribute to your project. So it's a way for us to speak to maintainers, to think about how your contributors assess your project, or whenever a new contributor joins, how do they participate? Do they feel welcome? Do they have the resources that they need? So taking a step back, and the way we have designed the program is not just a one-time badge thing, it's a continuous process where we have like different badge levels as well that would share in time to come. So it's not a one-time thing, but it's a reflective process where you can look at what we've done, think about how you attend to your contributors' needs, and make changes. Because looking at taking an example from the DEI events badging we've been doing since 2020, it has also been a process where a lot of event organizers have also given us feedback, where we have also learned from how people organize events, and we have also taken feedback from our applicants, and we have improved the process over time. So this is not a judgment to open source projects, but for us, it is self-reflective process where we aim that maintainers are all around the world can help make their projects more inclusive and diverse for their contributors.
Okay. So I want to make sure I'm hearing all of you correctly. So if we were to break this up into phases, if you will, phase 1 and phase 2. This phase 1 is this DEI.md file, diversity, equity, and inclusion.md file. And maintainers or community leaders are supposed to take this document and on a project basis, they're supposed to do this self-reflection, if you will, across these 4 different metrics. And the metrics are project access, communication transparency, newcomer experience, and inclusive leadership. And they're supposed to take a step back at whatever their efforts are. They're just supposed to be thinking about how are they doing this. And it's just meant for them. It's not for anybody to judge. We're not coming in and say, nope, this is a bad way to do it. This is the right way to do it. It's meant for them to just signal to anyone that comes into their community that they've given thought to this and hear some of the things that they're doing. So there's no right or wrong answers in these. And we should not just see what's listed in this template here, but we should see whatever it means to them within their community. Did I get that right? Or is there something that someone else, that I missed? Or
I think that's right. I think we want to see just their honest reflection, and the act of creating the file is a form of signaling that they care.
yeah, absolutely.
I
Elizabeth?
would also say it signifies that they're willing to do it transparently and collaboratively with their community. You know, so the leaders can look through this document and write down what they think is happening, but also we're hoping to kind of open that feedback cycle of like what's reality versus what do we think we're doing. And in that way, you know, the community can also help build this document. And so, you know, transparency and collaborative building of this document is something that we like to see. And also, I just want to mention in CHAOSS, we know that there are a lot of people who care about community health, not just potential contributors, but also, you know, folks who are running OSPOs, folks at companies, folks in foundations and funders. Like a lot of people care about making communities as healthy as they can. And this is just one step. So, you know, a lot of people care about what's going on in communities. And this is a good way to kind of signify that to those folks as well. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and I know you all mentioned, you know, Sloan Foundation and Ford Foundation, who's generously been supporting this work, but also we've heard from companies, corporations, founders, philanthropists, when they're looking to provide funds, hopefully through GitHub sponsors, you know, to these communities, they're also looking at ways that they are creating an inclusive environment as well. So this is actually a signal to them. So completely get that. So if that's phase 1, what does phase 2 look like? We've been talking interchangeably about this badging process. So you fill out this DEI.md file if you're a maintainer or a community leader. It's now as part of your repo. What happens next?
Sure, I can kind of speak to that. And so I could, you know, I'd like to just reiterate the importance of, you know, kind of having the DEI.md file be that expression of the work that you're doing within your community. I think that's critically important. And it's just really meant to signal to your community members a commitment to DEI. It's really important for us. So really, in essence, the review comes from, I think as Elizabeth pointed out, not from an external set of CHAOSS reviewers like event badging, like how that's set up, but the review comes from your own peers and community members on that file. So if there are things that within your community, say it's been reported in the DEI.md file, but community members don't feel that it's expressed quite correctly, there can be a conversation around that to kind of improve the DEI.md file. So I'd just like to kind of agree with everything that was said prior. So following the posting of the DEI.md file, we will, and Sean can speak to this a little bit, you know, provide an automated review of the DEI.md file, checking for the presence of the 4 metrics and really ensuring that there's language behind those 4 metrics on that DEI.md file. So this text that describes how those 4 metrics that are being addressed. The actual content, again, is up to you and your community, along with the deeper review that the content is representative of your community efforts. But with that successful review of really just the DEI.md file, we propose a project DEI bronze badge to be issued. And it's from this issuing, the badge can then be used and displayed by you and your community in any way that you see fit. You know, we do recommend sharing it in a public facing project page. You know, go ahead and share that broadly and link to your DEI.md file associated with that badge so people can continue to review and see your project's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's really kind of where this first stage is at, kind of leading us into, you know, moving from just the DEI.md file into an associated badge.
Okay. So I have to play, you know, as they call the devil's advocate of this, right? Because I know people are going to be asking this question. So you fill out this DEI.md file. Nobody's really monitoring and there's no right or wrong answers. There's this automatic scan, at least at the bronze level, and everything is subjective. So you can put anywhere like, I'm trying my hand out at growing plants in my house. Like, hey, I'm a welcoming community because I have plants in my house. I could put anything. This seems like it's going to be pretty easy to game, but you know, there might be some bad actors, which I hope is not the case. But I'd love to see, what are we putting in process to prevent this from happening? And how are we going to measure to see if this is even working?
So there's a number of things we're doing to prevent gaming. First of all, Chaos Africa and our team are working closely together to ensure that only a maintainer of a project can submit for a badge. So the maintainer is going to create the DEI.md file and apply for the badge. And then the report that's generated is going to be returned to the maintainer and they can do what they want with it. And I think really importantly, we're applying chaos metrics. We're looking at the nature of the inclusivity of the language and the nature of the communication on a project to determine, you know, how well the project aligns in comparison with other reference projects in terms of the 4 metrics in the initial badge. And then we'll do this for each of the metrics in the subsequent badges. But we're not going to provide a report that says, here's your score. Instead, we're going to map different kinds of quadrants to different kinds of advice. So projects are going to get at the first level sort of advisory information, like here's some things that you could try that might retain contributors more effectively, or here are some things that you can try that might lead to more friendly communication on your project. And then when a project applies for the second level badge, what we've just talked about in the design is we're going to look at, you know, how they're satisfying the requirements as they express in the DEI.md file for the second level badge, and then re-execute the scan for both badge levels. And we talked about last week, well, what happens if the project hasn't changed? And all we're going to do is, again, in a really nice way, point out to the project, hey, instead of maybe in an advisory tone, here's some specific things we really think you should try. Like no more than 4 things in the first report, no more than 1 or 2 things that you should really try in the second report. Really trying to be helpful, not critical. And I think also important is this is not telemetry or surveillance on individuals or projects themselves. These reports are exclusively distributed to the maintainer who applied for the badge, and individuals are not identified. We really want to respect the identities and the right to privacy of the individual contributors on these projects.
You know, I love what you said there. The intent of this is to be helpful, not critical.
Correct.
Not being judgmental. There's no right and a wrong way, but this is just being able to take inventory and constantly improving and looking to improve yourself and just being a signal of other. So how does this really fit into the context of badging? Like if we were to take a step back, what is this really meant to do? Elizabeth, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, so the whole idea of the badging is to, you know, give projects a way to dig a little deeper and reflect on their own practices and maybe answer some questions that have never been asked. You know, maybe they've never even thought about how transparent are our communications. Maybe we should think about that. You know, so it is more about that self-reflection. And because projects are in so many different cycles of evolution and maturity and size, and you know, it would be pretty unreasonable to expect them all to have everything figured out perfectly. You know, so So really this is meant to be, as Sean just said, helpful and giving projects a way to progress and to build in an iterative process. So that's why we wanted to start off with these 4 basic metrics. This is the bronze level, 4 basic things you can focus on and really take a look at. And then when, as has been mentioned before, we have then maybe the next level would be silver, and there would be these first 4 plus a few more. And then gold will add a few more, and then we'll finally have a platinum level, which, by the time they're getting up to that level, it's going to show the project's attention to, maybe 10 or 15 different DEI related metrics. So it's, again, it's not saying you're good or bad, but mostly where are you in that self-reflection journey around diversity, equity, inclusion. And, it was funny when we were first kicking around this idea of taking the event badging and kind of trying to apply it to projects. We had been thinking about, like, how do we know if this is working? Like, what's our metric for success? And, there's a lot of things that we could look at, but one thing I think that really floated to the top was not so much like how many people have what badge, but how are projects progressing? Because that's really what we wanted to see. We really want to see projects growing and thinking more and more about what they can do around diversity, equity, inclusion. So then the next question was, how can we support the projects? How can we help educate them on, like, so I want to, focus on newcomer experience as well. How do I do that? I don't know how to do that as a maintainer. Can somebody help me? And so that's really where we try to tie this program in with our DEI Resource Hub that you mentioned earlier, Demetris. Like, so everything in the DEI Resource Hub is also going to help support folks figure out how to attend to these metrics and how to build on the ones that will come in higher levels and things like that. So we don't want to just, throw everybody like, good luck, see ya, have fun with that. No, we really do want to help support the effort and help educate and really see that progression made.
So that's awesome. So just want to, rewind the tape a little bit here. So maintainers and community leaders, they'll be able to fill out this DEI.md file. It's meant to be a self-reflection to see how they're doing against these 4 metrics here of project access, communications, transparency, newcomer experience, and inclusive leadership. Again, this template is meant to give them some examples, especially for those that don't know how to be started, but it's not like, yes, we did this or no, we didn't do this. It's meant for them to put whatever it is that this means to them in their community. After they fill out this DEI.md file, there's going to be, at least at this bronze level, just an automatic scan, just to make sure that people can't game the system, as we talked about earlier. And if it looks like they've actually addressed each of these 4 metrics, they'll receive this bronze badge. And this bronze badge is going to be a signal to newcomers or people to their communities, as well as to funders and just the world at large, that this is how they've been thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion within their project along these 4 metrics. And then the next thing that we're going to be doing is building out this badge at different levels. So this will be bronze, but we'll ultimately have a silver, a gold, and then a platinum. And it's not meant for people to try and just get this badge and it's a one and done, but it's meant for them to really just constantly take stock and inventory of how they're doing. And the metrics of success is the movement of the people that are progressing. We want to see those smaller communities or those communities who are just getting started in their DEI journey. We're going to celebrate when they move from bronze to silver. We're not going to just be celebrating when they get to platinum. We just want to see them every step of the way and celebrate them in this way. And so that continuous learning, which we're not only going to constantly give them these reports for them to have examples of how they can improve, but we're also in our DEI Resource Hub going to seed that hub with resources so that people can get different ideas on how they can do that. So I think I just kind of rolled the tape back. And so I know everybody's, saying, we want to actually, start filling out this DEI.md file. We want to get, qualified for this first badge and start in this process. People are going to want to get involved when they see this. So Ruth, if you could tell us, how can people get involved with this initiative?
Yeah, sure. As excited as we are to put this out there, we also want to do it in a step-by-step process and, see how it goes. So we're starting with the pilot program, which is going to be available very soon. I'm dropping a link in the chat, and it will also be available for people that watch the recording as well. You can, sign up to participate in the pilot program, to even give us more feedback on how we can make this better, and not just also participating in the pilot program. The way we've been working has really been open for everybody to join the conversation. So you can also join the community, and also like join the DI working group, because we have those conversations almost every meeting, talking about how we would make this process better, because DI is important. So you can also join the community. I think someone says they need access to the form, so who would fix that?
Permissions, a perpetual internet problem.
Yeah, so we'll fix that very soon. So you can participate in the pilot program and also join the conversation, because we also want to hear from you. This is not just our effort, but we want it to be a collective effort where we hear from maintainers as well, what's important to them and how they want to learn from this process. So please do join the pilot program, and also you are free to join and welcome to join the community. We are very lovely people, like Demetris said.
If I do say so myself. So let me get this right, Ruth. We are open to any and everyone coming and joining us, and there's two ways that they can participate now. Well, and you can all get there from this one link. So if you go to allinopensource.org/maintainer/DEI-badging, which we have the link inside of the chat now, you can sign up and hit that green participate now button, and you'll have one of two ways that you can participate, or you can do both. The first way is that you can sign up for your community to be a part of this pilot. We are starting to solicit projects who's interested in this, filling out this DEI.MD file and then helping us as we build out this bronze badging before it goes, GA, so to speak. And then the second thing, we are building out each of these different levels, and it's only as good as the community. We need more people, more perspectives to come in and help support this amazing work. So you can go to that link. You can volunteer your project to be a part of the pilot, or you can actually sign up to help us build out this amazing work. And so I am loving this entire conversation. It reeks of all of the amazing parts and amazing things of, open source, where we're inviting others to participate with us. We're doing it out in the open. We're doing it transparently. We're working on our communication transparency. So there's a whole bunch we have synchronous meetings. We have async things that we can do. And above all else, we are shipping to learn. We could have sat in focus groups for the next year trying to figure this out, but instead we said, we're going to ship it and we're going to learn as we grow. And so we're going to do this, as I said at the very beginning, with the open source community, not for the open source community. So we definitely need all of you to participate. So I've spent the last 45 minutes getting all of my questions out. So I want to pause for a second to see if any of those that are in attendance with us today have any questions of their own before we start thanking all of the folks that's been with us this far. Are there any questions from anyone? Please feel free to drop them in the chat if you like.
Ask us anything.
This is an official AMA. Well, I won't belabor it too long, but if someone actually wants to just drop a question, we'll keep an eye off of it while we do some of our closing remarks. But I always like, before we close, one, thank you to the many contributors to the DEI badging initiative. As you can see, there are, a couple dozen people who've been with us, who's provided feedback, who's actually leaned into this work already. And we want to see more and more names on that slide. So we wanted to make sure that we recognize them. And then as far as closing messages, I love to hear from each of you, the panelists. What are some of the things that, or, just something that you would like for people to kind of end on or to know about this work as we move forward?
I would suggest that one of the things about badging on open source projects is most of them are kind of trophies. They're things that you get for technical accomplishments that you've already created, and it's great to show that, great to demonstrate your builds are stable, that you have a core group of maintainers larger than 2, these kinds of things that are easily measured. I think what the DEI badging program is really more coaching and helping and sharing the knowledge that's been developed through allinopensource.org and GitHub and CHAOSS over the last number of years. And so this is it's a badge about learning and progress, not a badge about, hey, I can build my Docker container.
Awesome.
I would also just like to add, just even the process of going through and filling this document out for a project is even just that process. Even if you don't end up applying for a badge and you just want to have this document, I think just that self-reflective process has been so helpful. We've seen it in the event badging program time and time again, where folks have mentioned even just filling out the application caused them to, again, answer those questions that maybe nobody had asked before or they'd not had to think about before. So, while we would love everyone to get a badge, even just filling that DEI.md file out can be super helpful for the project and for potential contributors in the community.
Matt or Ruth?
I think I would want to talk about the efforts, joining efforts as well to make this happen. I know we've talked about, I want to emphasize on joining the community because we've had different views, different people are part of this. So I would really urge maintainers to also be part of the conversation and even contribute to the conversation, because when we learn from other people's experiences, we're able to make this process even better for everyone.
Awesome. That's great. Matt?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna echo what Ruth had said. So we're here to learn. Speaking for everybody on this panel, we don't have all the answers and we need to learn from everybody. And so that's really important for us as part of this process in the past and going forward. So when Demetris had pointed out, different ways to participate, yeah, we certainly do want to engage with communities who want to be part of the pilot program, but we also want to engage with 1, 2, 5 people who can give us insight as to how to best think about project badging. So I really just encourage you to join in any way that feels comfortable to you.
Yeah, please, please, please. And I promise we are very cool people and we love everyone. So we would love to hear from you. And even if you can't participate in one of our meetings, you definitely can give us some async feedback. Again, this is part of our efforts to open source diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's why All In, we always say, is not a set of programs, it's a community. And a community is made up of amazing people, such as those of you who are listening into this conversation. So we look forward to seeing you. We look forward to celebrating you when you get your first All In CHAOSS DEI badge. And with that, we will say have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.